What revenge of yours hit the victim way worse than you thought it would, to the point you said, maybe I shouldn't have done that? First story. High school. Oh man, this poor kid I used to work with at Wendy's. Kevin. He was a juvenile delinquent. He was a few years older than me, a little bit bigger than me, had nasty tattoos on his neck, and supposedly was out of jail on work release. He tried to be a tough guy and bully me whenever we worked together. Stuff like generally talking smack unprovoked, getting really close up in my face, and that stance where you puff out your chest and pull your arms back like you are going to swing. The most irritating was when he would walk right up in my face, then flinch like he was going to throw a punch at me, then just laugh and say some rude comments. I got along with just about everyone at work, and he did somewhat, but we just did not fit together. One day the exchanges between us were so apparent and obviously stressed, everyone working was talking about me fighting him. I dispelled these rumors as I wanted to keep my job, but my destiny on this day said otherwise. First was the back door incident. The store had a large back door with a peephole in it, and it could only be opened from the inside. There was a buzzer outside that employees would push if they wanted back in. Well, Kevin was locked outside and his patience while awaiting his re-entry had run out. Instead of tapping the buzzer, this guy was mashing it and holding it down while everyone inside went nuts. We were all busy and I was running to the back to grab some heavy boxes. Holding these boxes, I was going to open the back door while I walked past. I tried to push on the door, but it would not open. I leaned into it but could not push much more because of the boxes I was holding. I was in a hurry, so I yelled, "Get back! I am going to kick the door!" He did not hear me over the loud, constant buzzing. I gave that door a swift, "This is Sparta" kick, and it opened about 3 inches, then bounced closed again. What the heck? I kicked it again and it opened, revealing a bashed and somewhat upset Kevin. He had been trying to look in the peephole when I kicked the door. I had just broken the crap out of his nose, like the tip was almost touching his cheek. Bright red purple, swollen eyes, broken. He was very angry. Immediately I started apologizing and backing away from him, but he came at me like a rabid monkey. Quickly we were surrounded by employees and separated. I was told to go up front and manage fries, and to not come into the back part of the store until Kevin left for the hospital. Then the final event, less than 10 minutes later, I was working the fries, which entails grabbing a metal basket out of boiling hot oil and dumping the fresh fries into an adjacent tray. I was doing this and everyone around me was talking about how I just broke Kevin's face. On his way, leaving our store for the hospital, he decided to come right up to me again and try to instigate a fight while I was dumping some fresh fries. Kevin pulled his signature move of flinching at me like he was going to throw a punch. I retaliated by returning my own flinch with the basket I was holding. I did not actually hit him with an incredibly hot fry basket, but I forgot about the boiling hot oil still clinging to the basket. When I flinched at him and shook the basket, tiny flaming hot drops of grease splattered his face and neck. I had just broken his nose by accident, then threw boiling hot oil on his face by accident. Instant fight on the ground. I am a wrestler, so his freshly broken and burned nose was just smashed and wiped across a dirty floor for a few seconds before it was broken up. He was an absolute mess. He left for the hospital. I got sent home. That was it. No charges, no questions from my manager or managers after. No more being scheduled with Kevin. Not even any paperwork about 2 vicious assaults and fights in the same day. I felt really bad, but simultaneously kind of justified. Both incidents were honest accidents, which could have easily been avoided if he were not such a jerk. I still felt like the outcome was worse than reasonable. Second story. I was 11. My older brother was 16. We would fight and argue, but one time I was running up the stairs away from him, and he whipped the back of my legs with a long rubber chew toy. It left a pretty big figure-8-shaped welt on my legs. I knew he was faster and stronger than me, and I knew if I tried to attack him, he would stop me. So I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and held it over the stove until it was red hot. I ran up to him and very openly went to stab him, knowing he would stop me. He grabbed my wrist to stop my thrust, as anticipated, and I pushed the red-hot head of it into his forearm as hard as I could. Man, I was a crazy asshole as a kid. Sorry, Mike. Third story. Coworker and I had a friendly prank war spanning 2 years. Close to the end of our war, he iced my car. Icing involves taking the hose to the parking lot every half hour and spraying a light mist over your victim's car when it is below 0 degrees outside. I finished my 12-hour shift to find a car encased in 2 inches of ice. My revenge was, I thought, both more inconvenient for him and less freezing my body off for me. I decided to take a bedsheet, drape it over his car, and only took 4 or 5 trips out with the hose the next night. So the next morning, he finds his car with a 1/4 inch of ice freezing a sheet to his car. When he started peeling off the sheet, he pulled his windshield wipers, arms and all, off of his ratty Jeep. I got a very angry phone call. I felt bad. The unwritten rule was embarrassing or inconvenient, no damage. I paid for repairs and he got his revenge. He planted a dozen pieces of smoked herring throughout my car. It took me 6 months to find the last piece, hidden under the carpet under the back window of my car. I can still smell it. I do not even own the car anymore. Fourth story. I had a girlfriend cheat on me, lie about it when I confronted her, and gave her the chance to come clean and work through it, and stalk me after I broke up with her. We were quite young, 17, so it was all very overdramatic, but I did love her a lot and was hurt by what she did. At the same time, I was very done and not interested in reconciling. She did not get the hint. I asked her nicely many times, then not so nicely, then demanded she fuck off. She would for a while, but then she would show up drunk and try and pick fights, insult me, and be sincerely hurtful. I eventually had enough, as you do. I told a couple of choice people in her school, different from mine, what she had done with gory details. She had sucked off her ex in his shitty car. I thought she would get dragged for it, and that would be that. Well, it turns out she was a difficult person in all other aspects of her life, too. Apparently, she was loathed at school, and people jumped on this news like starving beasts on fresh meat. I had text messages and instant messages from people I did not even know asking to confirm the news, which I ignored because I was really done with the whole situation by now. I eventually heard from other friends at that school that people had not let it drop and had even stuck posters around the school with pictures of her, announcing what she had done, offering her services with her phone number, photoshopping bananas into her mouth, and so on. It was brutal, and she had to change schools in her final year. I did feel a bit bad. If I had known it would go that far, I might have rethought telling those people. At the same time, she hurt me badly. She refused to leave me alone despite months of chances. And the other students reacted so viciously because apparently she was a total asshole to everyone in the school. So, I do not know. I surely did not expect that, though. Fifth story. Some girl hit my car in a hit and run. There was a witness to the crime, so the police were able to track her down. When I was asked if I wanted to press charges, I went for it. It turns out she had no license or insurance. She kept trying to fight the charges but wound up getting sued by my insurance, having to pay me restitution via the court system, and 4 separate charges between all her crimes, all of which included a decent fine. She was some 18-year-old single mother. I felt super bad by the end of it. My pursuing her and pressing charges was 100% fueled by revenge, and her life got pretty messed up from it. Yes, what she did was not right, but I can empathize with her being a scared 18-year-old who made a bad choice while caught up in the moment. Also, I am not justifying her behavior because she had a child, but it does make me feel bad for her. Being a single parent, as a woman or man, is a really expensive thing, and having a bunch of fees on top of that financial burden has got to be difficult. Sixth story. My sister used to kick my ass on the regular. She had mad anger problems and would go berserk over the littlest things. One time I turned the light on while she was trying to sleep. She beat me up, and I ended up going to prom with bruises all over me. All through the years, I never hit her back. I was a super sensitive kid, and if I ever hit back, I ended up crying to my mom about how I loved my sister and hated to hurt her. After I graduated, she had calmed down a bit, but she still had issues. Coming back from a small party one night, and she is back on her old bullshit. just getting mad over something stupid and going totally crazy over it. We get home and get out of the car, and I say I am driving home. She keeps saying I am too drunk, even though I had only had 2 to 3 mini beers. She grabs the back of my shirt, and I am so pissed off at her, I turn around really fast with my fist out to hit her arm or something. She immediately lets out a blood-piercing scream and drops to the ground. Blood is spurting everywhere. She leaves a trail as she runs inside and wakes up our mom and dad. Turns out I broke her nose pretty fucking bad, but my mom and dad kept saying it could not be that bad because I had done it and that she must have really been fucking with me for me to have done something like that after all these years of her beating on me. I felt so awful. I cried and tried to say sorry, but she ended up going to the hospital. I do not feel so bad now because she purposely never paid the bill, thinking she could bully me into paying it, and she never lets it go. She always says I am the reason her credit and other things are bad and that she still has collection agencies calling her over the emergency room bill. I am not paying that shit. Consider it payment for the years of abuse. Seventh story. I think I have told this before, but I think I was 15 and was in class and sat next to a friend of mine. He, for no reason, began to say, "Ha ha, your bald father," which I followed up with, "Ha ha, your bald mother." He started crying and ran to the teacher. I honestly forgot his mother had cancer and was getting chemotherapy. Eighth story. Had a roommate who basically let his new girlfriend move into our house in college. She helped herself to everything in the house, but never contributed. Finally, she parked in my parking spot, and that was my breaking point. I let all the air out of all of her tires, thinking she would just air them back up and it would be an inconvenience. Instead, she ended up buying all new tires. Whoops! Never came clean about it. Ninth story. Back in middle school, a friend of mine threw a small wadded piece of paper at me. I retaliated by throwing the only thing I could find, which was mud close to my shoes. Smacked him right in the face with it. The worst part is, it turned out to be dog shit that was at the bottom of my shoe. I still vividly remember his angry, "What the fuck, man? I throw paper at you and you throw dog shit?" 10th story. Way back in elementary school, a friend threw a piece of chalk that hit me square in the forehead. It was the most humiliating moment for younger me as everyone who saw that started laughing their asses off. Children are assholes. I plotted and planned my revenge to get back in the exact same fashion over the next couple of days. One fine day, weapon in hand, I find him perfectly placed a chalk throw away from me. I yell out his name and quickly launch the projectile as he spins around. For some reason, he had his mouth open as he looked at me, and the piece of chalk flew directly into his throat. His eyes widen and he starts choking. I stood frozen in shock as he fell on his knees, coughing. Luckily, somebody grabbed him from behind and thumped his back, so he swallowed the piece. An adult walks in. I cannot remember who it was at the time, but she looks at me and asks what happened. At this point, I am shaking, realizing that I narrowly killed my friend. I say it was a mint. My friend, also shaken at this point, laughs it off, saying it went straight into his throat and he did not taste it. The adult shakes her head and says next time just hand it like a normal person and walks away. Years later, when we were moving away to another country, I remind him about the incident and come clean about the whole thing. He snaps and yells, "I knew it!" 11th story. When I was a child, I was at a local river, a great swimming location that many individuals came to. My friend pushed me into the river, and naturally I came up spluttering and a little red in the face, but it was all in good fun. For the remainder of the day, I planned to get her back, waiting for my opportunity to push her in until she was at the edge of the river drying off. I pushed her, but her flailing and the slippery nature of the rocks she was on made her slip on the spot. Instead of just splashing into the water, she landed on her back, hitting the rocks hard, and then fell into the water. She was winded, but thankfully otherwise unharmed. Our parents were furious with me, and I just spent the few seconds it took to get her out, which felt like a lot longer to me, just hoping I had not broken her back or something. 12th story. When I was bullied by some local children, I filled the petrol tank of their family automobile with grass, dirt, sticks, stones, bottle caps, and pretty much anything I could jam into the petrol tank. I felt sorry for that poor automobile. 13th story. My older brother was always quite horrible to me as a child, and my parents never really did much about it. He was also much larger than I, so I could not retaliate in a physical way because I would be swiftly crippled, cross-faced, or subjected to the walls of Jericho. One day I had simply had enough. My revenge? He had been playing Rome, Total War for a good 6 hours per day for about 3 weeks. I started a new game and overwrote his saved file. I had never seen fury like that. I regretted it at the time because he was so angry it scared me and it made him dislike me even more. However, now I praise my 13-year-old self for hitting him where it clearly hurt the most. 14th story. I do not know what it was, but a lot of the boys in my 6th grade class thought it was hilarious to try and trip people. They would get you no matter how careful you were. Well, I was pretty good at avoiding it, but when I was in gym class, this kid named Joey got me hard. I was dribbling down the court, and he nailed me. I face-planted hard. So I thought about how to get him, and I got him at lunch. He was holding a lunch tray, so his hands were not as useful. He hit a table and lost a tooth. I was suspended for 10 days, and a strict no-tripping policy was implemented, with immediate suspensions if caught. Shit sucked. My dad beat my ass raw. Sorry, Joey. 15th story. A neighbor lady was mean to me, so I went into the laundry room after her and shit on her clothes in the washer. I was 5. 16th story. When I was in nursery, preschool, a kid used to constantly bully me, take toys off of me, and so on. One day outside in the garden, he stole a toy tractor I was riding on. He stood up on the seat and stuck his tongue out at me. The age of 4 for me had finally been broken. I ran and kicked the tractor, which jolted it forward. He subsequently fell off and rolled down a hill into some stingy nettles and got some pretty bad cuts and bruises. I remember thinking right then and there, wow, I really did not need to do that. But that little part of me felt great. 17th story. I am still mad at myself for this. When I was a preteen, my friend and I went to one of those day camps that picked us up in yellow school buses. One of the other kids on our bus was a younger boy I will refer to as Eli. Eli was a terrible person. He would scream and spit and hump things, make a mess, and be as annoying and insufferable as possible. Riding the bus with him was a nightmare for everyone involved most of the time. So I came up with this idea. I found his family in the telephone book and called, pretending to be a camp counselor. I told his mother that he was misbehaving on the bus and that he would either be disciplined or kicked out of the camp if he did not stop. She believed it and said she would talk to him about it. I felt so fucking smart. Until the next day when a quiet, sullen Eli showed up with a black eye. 18th story. This kid in my class at school kept insulting my mother. So I said to him that if he insults her one more time, that I will get him after class. Your mother is a promiscuous woman, I replied. So after class, I waited for him outside, and when he came out of the classroom, I got him in a headlock. He forced his way out of it, and then he managed to crack the top of his head against a fire alarm, gashed his head open. He was bleeding all down his face and had to go to the hospital. He was absent from school for 2 weeks after that, too. I felt terrible about it. 19th story. When I was either 6 or 7 years old, I had been bullied by my neighbors on the bus. They had harassed me with toy knives, which at the time I thought were real, and had all around been very disgusting with me trying to talk about sex and other things around me, trying to take away my innocence, which at the time I had no clue what they were talking about. I had had enough of it, and I had told my mother, which told their mother what had happened. I would not necessarily say they did not deserve what had happened to them, but I was a very empathetic kid, and what happened to them had scarred me for most of my childhood. Their mother told their father their bad behavior and had beaten them quite badly. They left me alone for the remainder of my time being their neighbor. But I saw the cuts, scars, and bruises that had been left on their young bodies and how their moods had changed afterward from bratty little kids to completely silent and somewhat oppressed. 20th story. I was living in a house with 5 other people in college and ended up dating one of the girls for 6 months. I come home one day and she is showing some guy around our house who is her tutor. A month later, she dumps me, And it is this tutor who she is dating instead. I can hear them cooing to each other, kissing and engaging in sexual intercourse. It is driving me insane. Never date a roommate, by the way. Every time I go to the bathroom, I see his toothbrush in there. So in that state of mind, I decide the best revenge would be to take his toothbrush and scrub the toilet with it. And I did this multiple times over the course of a couple of months. At the time, it felt like justice. Now it seems super childish. And although I do not know if he ever got sick, I am worried about what my actions may have caused. Besides, it was her I should have been mad at, and not this guy who probably had no clue. 21st story. In elementary school, there was a bully kid who would make fun of me. I had a bad bowl cut and was pretty small, so it was not surprising. My friends and I usually just ignored him. Anyway, one day this kid from Brazil moved into the house next to mine. He was 1 year older. We used to play soccer together every day after school. I mentioned to him once that this kid would call me names and usually while walking home from school would follow behind me taunting me. One day I am leaving school and this kid is going slowly behind me on his bicycle shouting stuff. Just dumb kid stuff, you know? The Brazilian kid comes out of nowhere, knocks the kid off his bicycle, and just starts beating him. The bully is on the grass crying and bleeding. The Brazilian kid grabs the bicycle and gives it to me, saying, "You can keep this," and then walks away. I did not know what to do. I just laid the bicycle next to the kid and walked home. He was not at school for about 1 week. Later in life, I found that kid had a really bad home situation with abusive parents. I was 10 years old at the time. I always felt bad for that, but he quit bullying me. I still occasionally see that Brazilian guy. I do not think he even remembers it. Cool on him for helping in his way, I just think it went too far. 22nd story. I was dating this girl, and my friend saw her around town a few times and humiliated her in an effort to embarrass me. I told him to stop bothering her, but he did it again. That night, I convinced him to try getting back together with his wildly insane and manipulative ex-girlfriend that he had not spoken to in years, thinking that he would just humiliate himself by trying. Well, they banged and got back together for a while and had a baby. Now they are terrible single parents. 23rd story. My friends and I used to pull a lot of pranks on each other growing up, and about 10 years ago, I was helping my buddy set up a new business. He was ordering business cards, and the company he was going through was offering, I think, 500 or so free with a large order. So we decided to prank our other friend. We made business cards with his name, phone number, home address, and had his job title as professional creep with the slogan, "If I am creepin', you are not sleepin'." We passed these cards out all over town. He was getting really harassing phone calls for a while and could not figure out why. After about 2 years, he found one of the cards on a random fridge at a party and put two and two together. He was pissed and is still getting random calls 10 years later. I feel really bad about that one. 24th story. A kid on my track team would always come by and take a drink of whatever I had with me. I was sick of it and brought a root beer with me, which had been spiked with 3 times the recommended dose of root beer flavored X-Lax. Sure enough, he came by and I said, "You know what, Tony, why did not you just take the whole thing?" Well, we were having a home meet that day, and he was our best pole vaulter and part of the relay team. I thought maybe he would feel a little off and underperform. In the midst of our warm-ups, he went missing and was absent the entire meet. 25th story. When I was about 7 or 8, there was this girl at my school that was absolutely horrible. We will call her Cindy. Cindy would run up to you and pull your hair out, steal the toy you were playing with, eat your snack at snack time, and so on. In other words, she was a real bitch. One day, as we were finishing up recess in the playground, she came up to me, pulled my hair, and took some with it. That was the last straw. As the teacher was gathering everyone inside and was not looking our way, I grabbed Cindy by her pigtail and dragged her over to the playground. Now, this playground was built in a strange way with a sort of enclosed area in the middle of 3 bridges that formed a triangle that you could not get out of. Sometimes we bigger kids would jump in there during hide and seek and climb out later. But Cindy could not because she was shorter. So I picked her up and threw her down in there and left to go back inside. It was not until about an hour later when the teacher realized that Cindy was not in class. I did not say where she was, and it took them another half hour to find her. I got in trouble and had to spend the next week in the principal's office and lost my Game Boy for a month. But Cindy never messed with me again. Also, as far as people saying it did not sound like I had many regrets doing it, I did regret it immediately since I was on my first playthrough of Pokemon Red when I had my Game Boy taken away from me for a month. I was devastated, and it was one of the longest months of my childhood. Now I could not care less. 26th story. This one is not as serious or entertaining as most of the answers you will find here. But when we were children, my sister threw water at me and ran away, so I picked up my glass of water and ran after her. I threw the water from the glass at her once I had her cornered. Unfortunately, the glass had slipped out of my hand and it hit her right across her face. She got bruised and cut pretty badly. 27th story. I guess revenge implies thinking out the act or some time between acts. But at the age of 14, I was rolling up the hose in my backyard with a friend since my mother told me to. The two girls next door were playing in their backyard and came over to talk. One was around 12 years old and the other was approximately 7 years old. The 12-year-old happened to be standing on the hose, and I asked her to move. She did not. I pulled the hose hard enough to make her fall over. At this point, the 7-year-old screamed bloody murder and ran right at me and bit my right side on the stomach. She was not letting go, and I could see blood starting to stain my shirt. I grabbed her head and tried to pull her away, but nothing worked, so I just fully punched her right in her eye. I was and am not proud of this, but it had to be done. What was worse is that the house was owned by a local church where I happened to go to Boy Scouts. Everyone quickly knew I had punched a 7-year-old and given her a black eye, but no one cared why. 28th story. A married female coworker I was sleeping with accused me of rape and sexual harassment when she thought her husband might find out. So I had the letters and pictures she had been sending me anonymously sent to her husband. She ended up getting fired, and her husband tried to take her 2 children away. He literally showed up at our workplace, threw the pictures and letters in her face, and dragged the children away crying. 29th story. When I was in 5th grade, my teacher gave out a shit ton of homework on one day, so I got the whole class to help me write a letter to the principal. She found out and cried and shit. I felt really horrible because she was just trying to get us ready for a test coming up. I still feel really bad every time I think about it. 30th story. Oh, I have one for this. My grandfather was a bit old school and gave me prison yard advice for my first week of school. He said, if anyone picks on you, just deal with them right then. Do not take it. During the first week of kindergarten, a first-grade child was pushing me around, not letting me go back to class. I pushed him down against a fence and kicked him in the face 3 or 4 times, splitting his nose. I almost got kicked out of school until they found out my grandfather had told me to do it. The thing is, no one messed with me after, and that guy was nice to me all the way through to graduation. Thank you for watching this video to the end. In the comments below the video, have you ever been in a situation where you thought, maybe I shouldn't have done that? And also be sure to subscribe to our channel not to miss new super interesting videos. And I advise you to watch our other videos.